Okay, great. We're going to get started now. Marketing mixology panel. Marketing mixology panel. I like the term mixology because it has different references, Tony. So I like the word mixology. The marketing mixology panel provides business educators with a glimpse of the latest trends in marketing and insight on the best practices that can be applied to promoting business schools and programs at HBCUs and minority serving institutions. Serving as our moderator today is the one and only interim chair, Marketing School of Business Administration, and you should have heard him yesterday at the big cookout and the launch, and maybe he'll do it again sometime in the future, but not today. He rapped for the students, and they loved it. So let's give Professor Donna West a big round of applause.
Thank you. First of all, welcome everyone. It's my pleasure to serve as the moderator for marketing mixology of business schools, in particular HBCUs. Before we get started, I'd like to do a little lecturing, so to speak, because I like to lecture, and I'd like to give a little backdrop about marketing. As we know, everybody's in marketing, regardless if you're a church, a hospital, or university. So we've been a little bit stubborn, if I may take the privilege to talk about colleges and universities. We haven't been very good, in my personal and professional opinion, of selling ourselves. As I mentioned before, hospitals used to be lagging. And people used to say back in the day, if you get shot in front of Grady High, call the doctor and go somewhere else. And as you know, Grady Hospital is a very powerful trauma center and probably one of the few in the state of Georgia. It's been doing a very good job, in my personal and professional opinion, of marketing. Global mega churches, oh my goodness. People used to talk about churches, just get the alms, whatever Rev gets is fine. Now these churches are mega churches with big marketing strategies and probably big budgets. Depends on whom you ask, much to people's chagrins. If not, there certainly are business models. And lastly, colleges and universities. I've taught at HBCUs now for 40 years. I started at Clark College and went to Alabama A&M, worked at Morehouse, and I was exiled from the AU Center for 2 years. I spent 2 years in Buckhead at American Intercontinental University. As you know, that is a for-profit university. And I learned a lot about working at a for-profit university. They're very marketing-driven. They're very market-driven, much to the vexation of many people. They say, these folks are in marketing without apology. They took your application today. They got you in school tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. They're profit-driven. So some people hate that about education. But regardless of how you spin it, we are in business. We are in marketing. Usually I give this assignment to my students, especially my MBA students, about developing strategies or really making a case, doing a case analysis on colleges and universities. So, we talk about and I'll give, it's not like really a lecture, but just a little backdrop. Product, price, place, promotion. The 4 Ps. You've heard those things before. The product is everything. I tell students all the time, in one word, define the product. Everything. You define it is the color, the name, where it's located, the curriculum. There's an infinite way to discuss a product, and it's you decide. So our product is really education. It's an intangible. I tell my students all the time, after 4 or 5 years, when you graduate, that's all you get intangible. So 99.99999% of everything you get is intangible, and it is a service. So make it do what it do, as the young people say, because all you will walk away with is a piece of paper. And moreover, our society is a service-oriented society. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, a very manufacturing, powerful city. Those days are gone now, long gone. They're probably not coming back, as we know. So we are in a service-oriented economy. Conversely, as I said about educational institutions, all of us have been a little bit slow and sluggish compared to industry. I know some of my colleagues have found their way from industry into academia, and if I can just vicariously feel their frustration. It takes too long to do this and whatever. But the good news is today we heard about how fast the creation of the business school at Atlanta University and Clark College were implemented. Lickety split. So 1945, 1946, to see where we were and where we are today, we got to be more nimble. We're forced into that. Lastly, before I turn it over to the panel, we have to do a better job of telling our story. That's any black institution you have, and I'm not just saying it's just because it's black. Probably a lot of institutions have to do a better job. My vexation comes from having taught at HBCUs for a long time, and when I saw that movie, Hidden Figures, about those black ladies that helped NASA go to the moon. First you tell me I'm not good in math. Then you subsequently showed me a movie from Hollywood, filmed often here on this campus. And I said, I have to learn this from Hollywood. I said, I was happy because I was very excited about the movie because it gave a certain, it was a real story. I said, I'm learning this now, what happened in 1964, 65, whatever, from Hollywood. We're not doing a good job. I'm very hard on myself first. So I said, wait a minute now. Here we are learning about this through Hollywood. So now the ball is in our court. It's always been in our court. It always will be. Second of all, we talk about gentrification. We are less than 1 mile from the Mercedes Stadium. I've been in Atlanta long enough to hear the Georgia Dome and Mercedes Stadium is going to bring economic development to Southwest Atlanta. I said, why would you? Why would you? You look at this side of Northside Drive, this side of Northside Drive. It's night and day. I'm not saying this disparagingly. I'm saying this is the good news, very good opportunities. So product is everything. Price, we have to sell value because a lot of my students say, I don't have the money to go to school. Then I look at the consumer goods. I'm not spending anybody's money, nor should you. I look at the cars we buy, the shoes we buy, the consumer goods that we buy. I say you have the money, you just didn't invest it in education. So we have to do a better job of selling that. And it's a tough sell, as I said, because it's very intangible. Distribution. Obviously, distribution is product, price, place. We talked about some collaborative initiatives. We're in the backyard of many other institutions, and institutions are reaching out to one another for the synergy. Obviously, Deion Sanders down at Jackson State. People are talking about the modality with which our schools are using now because we've been disrupted. We've been thrown into that COVID environment to be online. As I said before, when I taught at for-profit schools, a big presence was online. So product, price, place, promotion, distribution. Lastly, which our panel I'm sure will address, is the promotional aspect. The promotional aspect, I always tell my students, just remember this, the A3Ps. 1, advertising, 3 Ps, packaging, publicity, personal selling, and the last part, sales, promotion, and incentive. So without further ado, I would like to discuss a few things. One, this is my favorite article. It's called Preparing Future Business Leaders for Tomorrow. It's a 1997 article that appeared in Black Enterprise, and they interviewed about 12 deans from HBCUs, one of which was Dr. Davis. And so they asked a lot of questions and answers which have been addressed today. So without further ado, I'd like my panelists to introduce himself, herself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of freestyle like my colleague said I did yesterday. And I did freestyle yesterday because everybody kept prodding me, so I actually never met a mic I don't like. So take it away, please.
Oh, man. I believe you. I think you do love that
You
mic.
think so?
So my name's Adam Harrell. I'm the co-founder of Nebo Agency. We're one of the largest independent agencies in the Southeast. We started in 2004, not too far down the road on Mitchell Street. And really, you know, as I think about things, it's how do we tie back to what the needs and wants and perceptions and aspirations of your audience are. So everything I do is always grounded in that piece. So thanks for having me today.
My name is Jennifer Rogers-Givens. I'm a SVP at Matlock Advertising, which is owned by a Morehouse graduate and one of the professor's former students. And what we do is we are a multicultural agency that has been around for 35 years, serving primarily African-American insights for clients, but also as multicultural has changed, looking at LGBTQ, Hispanic, women, subgroups of the total market. And so what we really lean on is being thinkers and doers. Kent says that all the time. You can think, but you also have to do. And so everything we do is rooted in strategy to be able to sell whatever product you have. And so I'm sure we'll get into the product that you all have, you guys are trying to sell today, but thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Cooper, and I'm from Georgia State University. I think most of you are probably familiar with us. I am specifically at the Robinson College of Business as the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer. I thought it was interesting. You talked about the frustration of people coming from industry. I am from industry. Before I came to Georgia State, I worked for Accenture as a consultant. I've worked on the agency side as well as the client side, but pretty much been in marketing my whole career. I think it's interesting what's going on now in education. I think it's similar to what happened in telecommunications years ago. and in financial services years ago, and that is we have to compete. We have to learn to compete, and we have to know who we are, what we stand for, and what we don't. So, that's it.
Thank you. So, I don't really know where to take this, but all these things are always on my mind. First of all, one thing that we've heard over the years is gentrification. And as I mentioned before, I was born in Detroit and we're here in Atlanta. Georgia State, somebody told me, I don't know if this is true, one of the presidents at Georgia State was an urban planner. And I don't know if that was like 20 years ago or whatever. But as you know, Georgia State is very robust. Downtown was fizzling a little bit, just a little bit, I don't even know the right word. The underground Atlanta, Grady Hospital, so on and so forth. So probably over the last 20 years, I know when I had an epiphany, I drove past Grady High. And you used to seeing, this is not saying it in a negative way, people with walkers and walking slow. I saw these kids with backpacks and walking fast. Then I went down past 5 Points by the park. I saw a lot of kids backpacks and walking fast. I said, what's going on here? Because I've been in Atlanta like 40 years. I said to myself, something's going on. And the answer was Georgia State. Again, back to institution being the center. Then, as I mentioned before, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but we were the poster child for, urban blight. So you go downtown now, it's Wayne State University, urban center, young people, the center. Then my colleagues from Africa, they know that Timbuktu was a city, but it was also a college and a university. So the center of a city is a university without apology. So what things are we doing to market ourselves, or what would you recommend us to do to really play a vital role in not just us being the beneficiaries of, enrollment and whatnot, but really to market a very robust community of colleges and universities in general, and HBCUs in particular, and the AU Center schools moreover in particular. So any way you want to spin that, please be my guest.
Well, I think the first thing is figuring out who you are and who you want to be. And there lies an intersection of what are our capabilities, who can we be, who do we want to be, and opening that up to the broader community. We just went through a big revitalization of our brand, a revision of our brand when I started. And it wasn't just the PhDs sitting around a table deciding who we were. We talked to faculty, we talked to students, we talked to staff, we talked to business leaders. So you cannot be who you are not. And one of the things I constantly said is we are not Georgia Tech, we are not UGA, we are Georgia State. And what does that mean? We are Robinson. And how does that translate into something that's meaningful and relevant that people are going to listen to and say, oh yeah, that matches. That's who you are. So I would encourage everyone to engage your entire community in the process of understanding who you are and how you want to be positioned in the marketplace.
I think to add to that, sitting on the agency side and being an advocate for HBCUs and an advocate for Black-owned businesses, the thing that is always the struggle for me when I am trying to sell a homecoming, an event, anything, is the metrics are not always there. Inherently, your story, the value you bring to the table. If that is not demonstrated in a way that makes sense to whichever audience you're talking about, someone you're writing a grant to, someone you want to come to your institution, it's not going to resonate. And a lot of times what I see with Black-owned institutions or businesses is it's just not polished. The story is not there. It's a lot of put together at the last minute. A lot of the timelines are not always met. And so when I work with some of these people, some companies, when you're requesting money, they have 15, 16-week leads for approvals. And so I think the other piece to add to what your positioning is making sure that story is polished, told well, and has metrics tied to it. People want to see the tangible outcomes. How many people do you have coming out? What are they doing when they leave? What is your attrition rate if that is a factor? How do you best demonstrate your core capabilities and your core values to your audience, whomever that audience is?
Yeah, I think to add on to the point about, know who you are, brands that are engaging are rooted in an authentic truth, right? And to understand that authentic truth, it can't be what you guys say in the room. It has to be how people describe you to their friends, to their family members, etc. And often when you look at it, from the roots come the fruits, right? Those stories, those historical stories of the original reason that your institution was founded, the people who fought, who overcome, who triumphed, who even lost and then came back again, those stories are oftentimes can provide sort of a basis in which your brand expression can come through. If you reference that history, if you reference that past, you can often do so in a way that sets a vision for the future, and it comes across as real, and it comes across as truth, and it has a sense of place. Georgia State is not Georgia Tech. Georgia State embraces being in downtown Atlanta. They want people that want to be a part of the community, that want to be a part of a city and an urban fabric. UGA it does not. And that's a very different thing. And that's a very different audience, and that's a very different student profile. And the way you sell or message to that audience is different.
And to piggyback on that, it's not only prospective students and students, because I think before I got to Georgia State, it was all about prospective students. And there's a tendency to forget there are many other layers of marketing. As an example, we have started efforts around B2B. So, I mean, my saying is that degrees without dollars don't make sense. So if you are not also talking to the people that are going to hire your students so that they understand what value they bring to the table, then that's a miss. If you're not leveraging your alumni and getting them to help you with your sales efforts, that's a miss. If you're not talking to other key influencers and getting them to support your brand, that's a miss. We have to understand that brand and building brand awareness and shaping brand perception is not the sole job of the marketing department. Every single individual within your community needs to walk the talk and walk the walk. And if they're not doing that, then your brand is not going to be as powerful as it should be.
Thank you. I completely agree with that. And as we know, as I mentioned from the onset, product positioning is something that we almost defer to corporate America or to multinational corporations as it's their job. But like our colleague is saying, our colleagues are saying, that positioning, knowing where you are and where you want to be. Conversely, in the acronym HBCU, the H stands for historically. So a historic perspective can be good and bad. As I said before, I've been in the AU Center forever. The thing I hate to hear is back in the day. Back in the day, but I love to hear it because it's a sense of pride and accomplishment. And as you can see, my hair has gotten much grayer. I don't know if you knew me before, but it's telling people it's back in the day. But looking at the students, that's looking at the future. And as I said before when I was speaking about maybe to the family, is every day we teach, we're looking at the Zuckerbergs and the Oprahs and the Steve Jobses and people that we don't even know. I tell the students all the time, the challenger has the upper hand. If you get ready to play basketball and you're playing LeBron and he doesn't know the likes of you, you got the upper hand because they haven't seen you. And everybody has been a challenger. But as an institution, excuse me, first we have to be mindful of, let's take this exercise. And then like our colleague is saying, what I love about marketing and being in education, we have multiple stakeholders. Students, and we have a disproportionate amount, it depends on whom you ask, of people who have gone not just to this school, but I'm going to use this school in particular, this school who have taught here, including myself. Some institutions call that academic incest. They say, you're hiring your own. No wonder you don't get any good flavor. You're hiring your own. Others say black people have a disproportionate amount of loyalty to our institutions, and this is one of the few institutions that we have left, so to speak. So it's a double-edged sword, and it's walking that fine line. Then lastly, before I turn it back over to our panelists, as our colleague was saying, Georgia State is not Georgia Tech. One thing we have to get across to our students is, and to many of our stakeholders, Black schools are not homogeneous, nor black people are not homogeneous. No race of people, they're homogeneous. But sometimes when we indulge ourselves in HBCUs, we think everybody's the same, and then we tell the world we're the same. Then when we get our have to mix and mingle, people say, I'm a little bit clumsy. Or they say, you know what, you'll be clumsy if you go to an HBCU, but they don't say that to our counterparts. So really our positioning, our legacy, and then lastly, to muddy up the water. That's why I always ask my students, because I love Georgia State. I tell my students, and back to positioning, I say, if Clark Atlanta looked like Georgia State, would you be okay with it? No, this is a black school that would lose its positioning. Other people say, wait. You can still maintain your vision and your mission by hiring black people or aiming at black people in the diaspora. Jamaica, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, Canada, the list goes on. Or people say, you know what? We attracted a lot of whites and blacks and Latinos and gays and straights and Republicans. We just don't call that our segment, our market. So maybe you can address some of these things I mentioned, and I hope I'm not saying it in a bad way, because this is the way I talk to my students. I just say, like, look, guys, if our school like this, oh, no, yes, no. So take it away, please.
So I did not go to a HBCU. I went to Penn State, a PWI. I went to school a long time ago. But the reason that I did not was because of my perception of what I thought HBCUs were. And I'll be honest, I'm from D.C., Howard was there. Everybody was like, you can go to Howard. I was like, why would I want to go to the 13th grade? Because everything that I hear, it's disorganized, it's partying. It wasn't what it really is. And now I am in Atlanta, and 95% of my friends went to school in the AUC. And my children will go to an HBCU because of what the value proposition is. But my point in saying that is brand perception is very real. What people are saying about you, good, bad, and different, is there. TikTok, in the form of digital media and cell phones, something bad happened, everybody knows. How do you create that narrative of all of the good things? There are schools within the HBCU network. Their School of Bees are posting and tweeting every single day, posting students, posting programs, posting everything. And I'm like, good Lord, I follow them because my son is there. But the idea of how do you combat, because it's bound to be some craziness, right? A dorm situation, something. There's bound to be something. How do you balance that brand perception in the age of digital marketing where at the touch of a finger, everything can go to shreds? And so I will say making sure that you are controlling the narrative as much as possible, making sure that, again, back to the beginning, what are your core values? What are you really striving against? How are you telling that story? And making sure everybody is telling that story. Everybody should be reading from the same script, but also from the differences, right? I know one of my closest friends is a white man who went to Morehouse. He came because he wanted an experience. Looking at the Howard Morehouse game, that band was full of more than a few white people who went to HBCU. It doesn't mean that they're not there for the same reasons. They're there for something. How do you publicize and how do you sell yourself as a value to anyone? But what your core value is your core value. You are rooted in educating African Americans or people who are black from around the world. That does not mean that other people cannot come.
I think the other thing that's really important is understanding that there needs to be an investment in marketing. Right. And the first thing is really getting academia to understand what marketing is. I have met a lot of colleagues since being in this position from other institutions, HBCUs, PWIs, and they have people that are communications people, but they are not marketing people. And communications is just a subset of marketing. Right. Marketing needs to have a seat at the table. Marketing needs to report to the top. Marketing needs to be part of the strategic plan. It is not an afterthought. People look at us. I have a 7, soon to be 8-person marketing team. And they're like, oh my God, there's so many marketing people there. But that's because we are a true marketing function. We do everything from content to social media to the website. Yeah, we have PR and external affairs, but that is not the bane of our existence. So I think the first thing is really, really understanding, because everybody can do marketing, right? We just throw those pretty pictures.
Right, right.
So I think the first thing is really understanding what marketing is, what value it brings to the institution, making sure that it has a seat at the table and some influence and power and control. And that's the way I think it's got to be in order for it to be effective.
And understand that it's an investment
Yes.
of time,
Right.
of resources,
Right.
of money. She joked and said, we just do pretty pictures. If you knew how many briefs and weeks and research went into most campaigns that you were seeing out there, it does not happen overnight. And I think a lot of times when I'm working with minority-owned businesses, whether they're small, large, school, radio, it doesn't matter. They're like, well, just do that tomorrow.
Right.
Like, I just need this post. Well, what is the intent behind it? Who is your target audience? Who are you trying to reach? What's your ROI? Like, thinking about through, if you do a campaign for something, thinking through every step of that process down to changing, right? You can create something, whatever it is, that campaign, is it performing, right? In the world of digital media, you can track it. Gone are the days where we used to make up numbers. Like, if you, back in the day, there was a lot of inflation of impressions. It doesn't exist anymore. Data is there. You can see how many people clicked on a banner ad. You can see how many people watched a TikTok story. You can see all of it in real time to be able to be agile enough to pivot, but it doesn't happen overnight, and you have to make the investment and understand it does take time. Like, it is planning. Some of my clients are in 2024 planning right now. And so when you think about the long haul, what are you trying to do? Yes, you have to be agile in that process. COVID changed everybody's world, right? As much as you planning and people putting the things, it changes. But at least you have a roadmap of where you're trying to go. And so think about that from an investment perspective. The same way you're investing in the students that you teach, how do you invest in your organization and your institution to be able to continue doing that 50 and 100 years from now?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think as you look at it, there's a few things that stood out to me. One is sort of this idea of, we've talked about the origin story and how do you differentiate your university from other places out there? How do you differentiate your institution? But also you have to think about your competitive set. And I think you mentioned this in your own decision journey, is that, there's not just the other colleges like you that are being considered. Right. There's the decision not to go at all. Right. There's the decision to try and go for a school out of state, maybe a different competitive set than what you've imagined. And as you start mapping out who your potential competitors are, and you start thinking through what would someone's objections be, or what would their decision criteria be as they look at this, you can start putting together a messaging strategy that says, hey, this is the value we bring to you. This is why our legacy matters. It's not just back in the day. It's here's our origin story, and that's why this is our superpower now. It's taking that perspective and making sure it all comes back to the stakeholder, whether it's the prospective student, the business leader that you want to hire your students, or the folks from the community that you want to tell your story in a way that's compelling.
Because I'm sorry to cut you off. There are only very few, and I won't say few, but all businesses are not black owned. Like, that's just fact. Right. A lot of people do not, still today, know what a HBCU is, especially when you're starting to go into larger corporations. And some large corporations are very intentional about diversity hiring. And I put it in quotes on purpose. A lot of people are intentional about that, but there are literally still people who work at organizations who are like, well, why? I'm going to Florida State. I'm going to what I know. And so it's putting on that sales hat and saying, I'm going to knock on your door till you see who I am. Because you can have advocates all day, but you have to have somebody out there making those calls, sending those sales emails. There's a sales funnel. It's a sales metric, and thinking about putting all the things we talked about, but there's still a level of awareness you have to have when you're thinking about your competitive set. You're also going against now, people think they can create an LLC in a business overnight with no training. And so you also have that. And so you're competing against a lot of things, but how, again, do you sell that value proposition that you have?
That's right. And also, another thing that we all are facing, as you probably know, I'll make it like twofold. One is that we have the data on our statistics. I can't quote them off the top of my head, but let me just say in general, it's anecdotal evidence. About 80% of all PhDs have come one way, shape, or form through a black college. Probably 85% of federal judges that are black, so on and so forth. But I see this kind of dichotomy, and my colleague said she went to a white school. My mother and father met at Michigan State. So I got roots here in Georgia, so that's how I found out about Morehouse and whatnot. But I hate this new thing, and I've always hated it. Are you like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King? Which one do you like? Like you can't like them both. Do you like Apple or Android? Like you can't like them both. Or you go to a white school. Wait a minute. Did you just say there are no blacks at this school? Now you shunning them. I said if I would ever write a book, I'd call it Hip Hop versus Wall Street. But this is my scenario. You got two black students. They're real cool freshman year. Now they're seniors. The hip-hop one got dreads. He wants to start a business in the neighborhood, so on and so forth. His roommate from freshman year is going the corporate route. Neither are cheering for each other because they're talking down to one another. They're saying, you're selling out because you're going to corporate America. Well, you're just staying back in the hood trying to revive something that's not going to work. Then when we get speakers like what we have today, the hip-hop person says, I don't see any partners at Coca-Cola or Pepsi. I don't see any partners in your law firm or your accounting firm. I don't see any partners in your advertising agency. Well, dog, you sure didn't cheer them on. The Wall Street guy says, the neighborhood is still full of urban blight. I don't see any detailing car companies or restaurants or whatever. Well, dog, you talked each other down. So I don't really see the synergy, and if we're not careful, we'll position each other as win-lose, not win-win. So I disdain that particular posture, so to speak. Also, as I said before, we certainly have a story to tell. Our numbers are there. I liken this to the NFL in 1960. Black boys and men that went to the NFL in 1960, almost all of them went to a black school. So I liken the NFL to the top of your game, whatever that is, law, entrepreneurship, call it what you want. The NFL is probably the top because they deal with numbers. They deal with analytics. They don't deal with all this, then the third. They deal with numbers, and we excelled, as you well know, in the NFL. Obviously, now we're integration. We're going everywhere. We're going everywhere. And again, a little plug for Deion Sanders. Okay, to me, Deion Sanders is doing what I feel that we've always done, but he's in a space where he can bring extra notoriety because he's an all-pro football player. So the backdrop I'm saying about our numbers are very good. Our numbers are good. And I said, we're not coaching the Lakers. We're taking a lot of first-generation students. We're taking a lot of people that don't have the background. And I'm not saying everybody's like this, nor do I want to create this ragtag environment. But I am saying that these are facts. So we take people where they are, and we develop them. As Dr. Davis would say, we take the coal and turn it into a diamond. But today, we're getting a lot of great publicity from corporations and governments and collaborative institutions. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Diversity, equity, inclusion. So I always say jokingly, I could tell a person, black or white, that's never heard of an HBCU. They were like, so you go to an HBUC? You go to a BUCH? And I always say, yes, I've gotten more diplomatic as I've gotten older. So yeah, I sure do. But conversely, we're getting more support and notoriety from Jeff Bezos' ex-wife writing all these checks, Amazon, the list goes on. So in light of that, diversity, equity, inclusion, how do you, and I like that you did like parentheses, because I always say there's always been diversity, equity, inclusion. If you make the numbers, and I typically use Coca-Cola's CEO as example, Roberto Goizueta. He was from Cuba, and he have a strong accent too. He talk a little bit like a dad. But I say, wait, this is in the 1980s when the Cold War was still common and intense. He was the CEO of Coca-Cola. I never met the man. I heard him speak once or twice. I said, Coca-Cola's not interested in Cuba. They're interested in dollars. So I say, you don't really need diversity, equity, inclusion in one respect, because I asked myself, what is the NFL's policy on diversity, equity, inclusion? I know they have a policy for coaches, but tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing and what you feel about diversity, equity, inclusion, and promoting us getting to a certain space.
And before you answer that question, just want to remind you we want to leave time to answer questions. And we would like to hear a little more from you all, specifically for our Dean audience, because they need to understand we can't leave it up to the university communication to push and market the university schools of business and programs. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll open the floor up for a few questions. Also, we'd like for you to hit on technology. Technology is there to help us. It's reduce some of the barriers of entry in terms of marketing, and how that would relate to helping our deans as they make decisions on how to get their name out for their schools and their business programs. Thank you, Dr. Bennett.
No, thank you.
Just a comment on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's interesting. After the George Floyd incident happened, we became very focused. We formed a council on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was one of the co-chairs. A Caucasian woman was my other co-chair. And we had several different subcommittees, if you will, that looked at everything from top to bottom, faculty, students, staff, etc. And I say all that to say that in the end, when we looked at what we wanted to do, one of the things we wanted to do was to get an associate dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in conversations, we decided that diversity, equity, inclusion is not the right terminology. It's culture, equity, and inclusion. And we say this because if your culture is not right, diversity is not going to happen. So no matter how many black people, Hispanic people, whatever, you bring into your organization, if the culture is not one that is supportive, if your culture is not right, then your efforts are going to fail. So I just wanted to say that about DEI.
Okay, thank you.
And there are organizations who will absolutely support, that have grants that you can go to. Figure out what their policy is and make sure your core values align, because some people who say that they believe in diversity, I've sat in rooms with CEOs of very large organizations, and they're like, I am not interested in equity, point blank. So that's to that, but I would say there are definitely opportunities and funds. What I would say from the question that was posed to us around what you guys can do as deans is create a marketing team of 2 if you can, right? You have to make it intentional for your line of business. It's a budget line item. It's not free. I mean, organic social is a thing, but with the emergence of Facebook and everyone else, they're about making money. They're about selling ads. I mean, the idea of you can get organic traction is almost ridiculous at this point because it doesn't matter. The algorithms are not there for you. And so you need to find someone that you can add to your department or 2 people who can help you plan strategically of how you're going to execute on some of these own channels that you can create if you have permission from your organization to have LinkedIn. There are people who don't have business degrees that want them. On Facebook, Instagram, what do you want your brand presence to look like externally, and how is that supplemented by the university? And also make a business case to the university of that you need the resources. Resources are money. Marketing costs money. The idea that people think that it's free, it's not. Design costs money, strategic thinking costs money, to gather all the data you have. So I would say what you can do on your own is really try to identify either the people within your organization, your group that can help you, or to add that to your future planning for headcount and resources.
Yeah, and I think to build off that, as you look at it, it's worth thinking about what are the things, the strengths that you want to have in-house, and what are you okay with outsourcing? And as you think about that, think about the things that are core capabilities, right? So things like the ability to set an overarching brand strategy, the ability to write and approve a smart brief and lay out goals and lay out measurable KPIs that anyone, whether they work for them or it's another agency, a partner, a freelancer, can work towards. Those are sort of those core capabilities that are going to be what you need for your marketing function to really work. And if you can get that nailed down, a lot of the other stuff's all going to flow from that. It's the foundation upon which it's all built.
And outsourcing is key, but again, it does cost money. I will tell y'all, a lot of people come to me and be like, well, I have $5 and I want to do something that is really $5 million. And I'm like, well, I don't really know how that's going to work, but tell me what your budget is and we can figure out what we can do within that budget. And be realistic and set your expectations if you do decide to outsource, because a lot of people have, pie in the sky aspirations. I want to be like this. Well, your budget does not allow for that, so do what's in your capabilities.
Yeah. So let's take some questions from the audience then, as our main moderator said.
Hello, my name is Ahmad Johnson. I'm a graduate student here for my MBA in concentration supply chain. So my question is basically, it sounds like the number one thing that's holding us back as a HBCU, because my undergrad is in Tuskegee University, so I'm coming from HBCU to another HBCU. So what are some things we can do to get the funding up so that we can compete with schools like Georgia State and UGA and stuff like that? I know we're not trying to be them, but we would like to have the same amount of students and have the same quality of, when companies come and looking at us like we're at Georgia State or we're at UGA. So how are some things we can do to compete against that?
I mean, I think first of all, you are competing with them, whether you think you are or not. You are. As an entrepreneur, when I'm looking at doing a career fair, when I'm looking at sponsoring, we're looking at recruiting, we're looking at partnerships with universities. We're looking at across the board, and we're saying, okay, we can only go to so many things. We can only send people to so many things. We can only do so many things. So you're already in competition with them. I think the better question or the way to think about it, and probably what you're getting at, is how do we differentiate and how do we win, right? Like, how do we win against UGA? How do we win against Georgia State? And that's going to be different for every individual institution here, because what makes you different, what makes you unique is something that only y'all are going to be able to figure out by talking to folks on the ground and figuring out what is the thing that makes it special. It may be a blend of legacy. It may be a blend of, the actual physical environment and emotional environment and the culture that you create. It may be the alumni. It may be that you're just doing something so interesting and remarkable. I mean, Coach Prime is interesting because, all right, they got Dion. What's he going to do? Remarkable is something people are remarking about. So I think, as you look at it, that's sort of the way I would look at it is how do we get their attention? And then once we have their attention, how do we win?
Start with a strategy to get there. Don't just do it. You have to be intentional. You are competing. The funding comes once you can tell your story in a really compelling way that's differentiated. But the first part of that is understanding what your strategy is, where you're trying to get, and then thinking about how you will get there. I think that is the number one thing you can do first if you have not already done that. If you have done that, then it's implementing some of the other things. How do you create a good sales funnel, right? Funding comes from people who have visibility. And visibility is a part of comms, it's part of marketing, it's part of a lot of things. Those ranking reports come out for a reason. Those are where people are going. And it's not that you're ranked poorly or whatever, but you have to think about, are there other places you can get? Because there are 6,011 ways that the ranking reports happen, but how can you get your story out there to be more compelling?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Monica Sadiq. I'm a senior business administration major, concentration international business management. I thank y'all for this panel. It was quite interesting. Although my concentration is international business management, I myself have worked a lot in direct marketing. And when I was hearing you all talk about students and us being more involved, I have a question as to how you being from a school yourself and companies, how you guys would best help students and facilitate a way for them to use their skill sets. Because I do believe that a lot of HBCU students are quite talented. However, because we kind of are private institutions, we don't get that opportunity by administration or things like that to set ourselves apart and stand out. I also believe that, at least speaking in the School of Business, we could have other opportunities in courses such as Adobe or learning JavaScript, those technological things, because we are Gen Z, or at least I am, and things like that, to better fit ourselves in this new corporate world.
Well, just speaking for Georgia State, we have so many opportunities for experiential learning for our students, whether that's insight sprints, working for a company, working on projects, case competitions. We have a Panthers program where we take students, Panthers in the Valley, out to Silicon Valley, Panthers in DC, Panthers on Wall Street. we just do a lot. We have Women Lead program. We do a lot of experiential learning for our students. We have a lot of faculty or people that are teaching that are not necessarily people with PhDs, but they are business people, and they are in the classroom. So I think those are opportunities that could be developed for people at HBCUs. The other thing is we have something called the Graduate Assistance Program, where we take graduate students and some of their tuition is offset by work that they're actually doing on campus in the departments. I have 2 GRAs in marketing, and those are people who are interested in marketing, so they are physically working on things that we are doing in marketing. Same is true in finance or other areas. So those are also opportunities to have a student come in. It could be paid or an unpaid internship where you're shadowing somebody and you're learning actually what's going on and how things work.
Yeah, and I think from the dean perspective, as you think about things like this, is, if you haven't put together like a business advisory council or an advisory council that you can use as a sounding board, that can give advice on curriculum, that you can send an email to, and hey, here's 15 to 20 folks that will come and meet with students, that will do tours of their workplace, that will show up in classrooms if we ask, because people want to help. We mentioned earlier the DEI and post-George Floyd landscape, and that really has been a sea change in corporate America. And there is an opportunity to use that momentum and to look at it and say, hey, people are paying attention in the way that they weren't 15 years ago, and some of that attention may be authentic, some of it may be inauthentic. But there's a chance to leverage some of that, and the easiest way to lead a parade is to find a bunch of people marching and get out in front. Y'all can lead that parade. These are systemic issues and they're hard issues, but so much of it comes down to workforce development from the business side, and y'all are positioned right on the front lines to help change that.
Yep. Companies are looking for it, and I think both of them said it. Internships, like corporations have internships. Most of the time, my friends who went to HBCUs, it was because I knew somebody from the school came back and recruited, right? Everyone's not going to do that, so how can you position yourselves from a business school perspective to proactively go out to some of these organizations that are in your backyards to say, I have a pool of students who need to get corporate experience, whether that's large, medium, or small businesses. At Matlock, we do have an intern program. There are also professional organizations that also have intern programs that you can go through. I know 4As, but they do interns, and they'll place you with a corporation that's a part of their organization. So there are a lot of different avenues to get there.
One other thing to add, and that is to make sure you're leveraging the alumni. We just launched an alumni ambassador program where we are pairing prospective students with alumni to ask questions, to kick the tires, because they're probably going to believe the alumni and other students about our school more than they're going to believe a recruiter. So it's the same thing with consumer goods, right? You're going to trust your neighbor before you're going to trust what the company is saying to you. So I would say definitely leverage the alumni network. They may have opportunities for students. Again, it could be paid, it could be an unpaid internship, but somebody there that can mentor the students and help them grow. That also has a loyalty to the school, I think is important.
Maybe we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Excuse me.
How are we doing this afternoon?
Great.
I'm Don Andrews, Dean of the College of Business at Southern University in Baton Rouge. Could you tell me a little bit about leadership in your organizations and the role of leadership? In other words, how do you move these organizations in transitioning? I mean, I was at Georgia State, I guess, at a master teacher program back in the 1990s, and they seem to be floundering. So what has happened to the leadership at Georgia State? And to the second young lady there, she said she wanted to send your family members to an HBCU. Now, what has changed your mind in terms of how you perceive HBCUs? So leadership is what I'd like to respond to. In terms of setting the tone, if you read Good to Great, everything rises and falls on leadership.
I would have to give a lot of credit to Dean Richard Phillips, who is our current dean. And I would give credit to him because he will take a risk. He sometimes is very conservative and conventional in his thinking, but he knows that he needs to change. That is the reason I'm there and why we have such a large marketing department. Everyone will look and say, well, what are all those marketing people doing? He knows that marketing was important and the way of the future. So I think it's a change in mindset and being open to taking calculated risks and knowing that what you've done in the past is not going to get you to where you are in the future. We have had a lot of changes in leadership. We have a new associate dean for CEI. We have a new associate dean for undergrad. We've hired a lot of new faculty. I think it's like 44% of them are people of color. So it starts at the top, I think. Because if I come in and I want to do real marketing and I don't have the support of leadership, then I'm not gonna be successful. So I think it's got to start with you all and setting the tone and making sure that when people come in with these crazy radical ideas from industry, that they are allowed to take that risk and you support them.
So what changed my mind was I went to Penn State. I think I did say that. I was one in a room of 500 people in the middle of Pennsylvania. And I've spent now most of my career in multicultural marketing for African Americans specifically. But when I started encountering, engaging with individuals who went to HBCUs, the camaraderie was unmatched, even within the Black people that went to Penn State with me. Yes, we're cool. Yes, we had our own experience, right? But there's something that comes from day one when you walk on campus to a HBCU because you wanted to be there, and everyone there, majority of them looked like you. You didn't have to tell somebody what else was going on. Like I sit on calls with clients today as reports are coming down from trials or whatever, and it's business as usual for them. There's no perspective in their minds of what mentally is going on for the people in their organization that look like me or are Hispanic when Uvalde happened or any of those things. So for me, it's intentional for my children to be in an environment that will embrace them and support them and encourage them. My sister went to Candler Theological School for her seminary degree, and she said the only semester that she had all A's when she had all Black instructors. And she said that came from the direct support that they gave me. And so for me, as a parent and as a professional in my career, I do everything that I can to uplift my community the same way other diverse communities do, which is not always seen in ours. He talked earlier about what does the community around, downtown look like. I have started other businesses where I'm supporting Black-owned individuals who struggle with marketing truly, because everyone can't afford an agency. Agencies cost a lot of money. I work for them, I know the billables. And so where do small businesses, entrepreneurs, and individuals fit in that pipeline when that's not their core capability? I work with chefs, they're like, I cook. I do not want to worry about how I'm going to promote this. And so there's space for everyone to be together, but that was what changed my mind.
Okay, quick question. I'm just trying to figure out how, you've mentioned strategy a bunch. It's been my observation, moving from industry back to education, that that there is little effort put into strategic plans and rarely any effort in operational plans, less effort in executional KPIs to put the scoreboard to make sure the operational plan matches up with this thing. So I'm just curious, is this a trend because of technology? Are people trying to DIY marketing?
I'll take the second part of your question first. Yes, people are trying to DIY marketing. DIY. They're trying to do it themselves because, again, marketing, those are the people that draw the pretty pictures, right? There's no strategy behind it. I can pick out colors, and people are like, I don't like that. Well, you're not in the target. So I think it's a matter of people needing to get out of the way and let the marketing professionals handle the marketing. What was the first part of your question? Oh, it was about strategy. I cannot speak for every single school, but we have a 5-year strategic plan. It happens every 5 years. We just refreshed it. It's called Accelerate 2025. From that strategic plan, I personally, because I'm responsible for marketing, had to say, okay, well, what's my mission? What are my strategic imperatives? What are the core initiatives that I need to do? So to me, it's a matter of having someone in that position that's going to take the strategic plan of the college and move it forward. But does the college need to have a strategic plan? Absolutely, yes.
One more question for you. Colleges have all these 5 years. I'm used to doing a rolling 3 years. These things happen. We're in strategic plan every year. We're looking 3 years out. This kind of static 5 year was a surprise.
I think that the things that are in the 5-year plan are more because it's a strategy. Now, the tactics might change and the initiatives might change, but the direction and the mission does not change. That should be long-lived, I believe.
To piggyback on that, if you don't have a solid strategic foundation, you will always be doing things.
Yes.
And there's no results from the things because you're not laddering that back to some goal that you have. And so you can either be caught up doing a whole bunch of things that have no results, or you can say, okay, let me pause and figure out what I'm really trying to do. A lot of times I see the resources from a people perspective are often not there, which is why you end up having, we got to do this tomorrow, right? And so sometimes you have to pause and say, do we want to keep doing things, or do we want to actually have results? The other part of it is the Canvas of the world exists on purpose. I remember the first time I saw a resume where somebody said Canva certified or Canva expert. I was like, what? Because people are DIYing marketing with no intent, making a pretty picture because that's what they like. Especially when you talk about small businesses or entrepreneurs, they be like, well, that's what's pretty. Why is it pretty? Is that what your audience is looking for? Okay, my owner, Kent, the walls in our building are Morehouse Maroon because that's what he likes. We're going through a rebrand. And it's fine if that's what you like. That's not what customers looking for, agencies are looking for. It's dark. It does, so we're having to go through this whole strategic mindset shift because of something you like. And marketing is not about what I like. I tell all of my people that work under me or that come to me from school, this is not my opinion. There's nothing that I give feedback on that is about what Jennifer likes. I don't like sans serifs. I'm not gonna argue with it if it's on a piece of creative, but what I will say is I give feedback from a strategic place that is rooted in research and insights for the target audience. And so, please don't DIY.
Yeah, I think there's always the challenge of how do you take something that's a big picture 5-year plan, and then how do you translate it down into annual planning, and then how do you translate that into a department plan, and then how do you translate that into individual goals, right? So I think as you look about it, it's almost worth breaking it down at that level. Okay, here's our 5-year plan, but this year, this is what we're focusing on out of this. This is our strategic focus for 2023. Here are our 4 key pillars of things that we want to accomplish, and then have the marketing team do the exact same exercises. Here's our strategic focus, here's our 4 key pillars, and then get that down to individual level goals, OKRs, whatever sort of goals you want to set, objective, key results, and measure them, and roll.
And don't confuse strategy with tactics. A lot of time people think that the tactics are the strategy. It's not. The tactics are a outset of that, but your strategy has nothing to do with what you're going to do. That is not what it is rooted in. So if you think about social and direct mail, all these things are channels, and from that there are tactics under those, but that is not your strategy. Your strategy has nothing to do with the 5 steps down the road.
Thank you, our panel today. They gave some great information. Let's have a hand for them. And we're going to ask, I keep wanting to say Dean. I now have Dean Zuna and the provost. If you would please come up, and while they do, just to sort of sum up the panels today, they're important, specifically aimed at our deans and business educators. The first panel was about the rankings and the future of business. And what we discovered is our institutions need to do a better job, our business schools, because the assumption going in is that the school's efforts to show up on that ranking will cover you. It does not. You may actually be in the top 10, top 20 amongst the business schools, and there are 5 different rankings for business programs and schools on U.S. News World Reports. You have to have a dedicated resource within your school to make sure that the information is collected and given out. So that's number one, because that goes to the heart of perception too, of what this panel was talking about. Number 2 was we had innovation. What does that really mean? What should that look like? And how should it be for you guys? You know, as schools of business, which again, the kids covered up, they're looking at places that have the cool innovation spaces. And I think what also came out is connecting what you're doing in sort of the traditional parts of your curriculum, accounting, marketing, and so forth, and relating that to the old entrepreneurial experience to our students is one of the things that is a good takeaway from that. And then, of course, last but not least is marketing. If I had to sum this all up, what we're saying is that you deans and leaders within the business schools need to take a more proactive role in your own marketing. You cannot leave it up to the university writ large. I just saw a thing the other day where the number of business schools that have their own unique channel on LinkedIn. I can count probably on one hand the HBCUs that have that. Now they're on LinkedIn, but they're a subset of their universities. So guess what? Whatever the university deals as a priority pushes down your messaging. So I'm hoping that all of these things will sort of gestate and result in some action. And it may mean we have other panels like this, maybe a much more intimate discussion with an action plan to come out of it. I will say in terms of the one challenge our schools face is we don't have the budgets. But that's why groups like the National HBCU Business Deans can come in. You know, sometimes just having a person dedicated to figure out what other grants and opportunities available specific to these schools, business schools, and then sharing that through the group, being a clearinghouse is just one example of the kind of things that can be done. Having a communications committee of professionals, since you all are engaged in business, to talk about how they proceed. So I want to thank you all again, and I want to thank our audience for being attentive. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the provost and the dean.
Thank you, Tony, so much. I just asked the provost, he was going to say before me, you know, so I asked him, no, just wait, let me do my small stuff, and we can hear a little bit more. I just want to say thank you to all the deans, to other participants, these panelists. It was wonderful. You know, I was listening, and I wish this discussion was in a classroom where I have 50, 100, and 200 graduate students. So I hope some of us will take that to the classroom. So thank you very much, the panelists. And the deans, I know some of you have to go to the airport, and thank you so much for sacrificing just to come to participate today. So we are very grateful. So before I turn it to the provost, I want to say this took a lot of time just organizing this. So I just want to thank the staff of the School of Business, Carmela Cole, which all of you have communicated. She was you know, I will say all in one, wonderful. And Sandy, I think she left, and other faculty members. Michelle, she's still here, and the chairs. Of course, one of the chairs you heard from him, Donald West, and Paul, I think, is still here. Thank you very much for your participation. We are grateful and hope to hear from you in the coming week and month. Thank you. Tony, good for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean. I think everything that needs to be said has been said. I could do like, for those of you who remember, Russell Simmons at the end of Dave Comedy Jams. He just comes out and say, hand him the mic, and he said, "Thank you all so much. Good night." I think we had a point to do that. I just want to add my thanks to all of you for taking the time to be here with us, to an incredible set of panelists. What we've learned from you today, I hope we have some of them on tape. We'll be able to play back to our students so that they can learn about what great things you are all doing. To our deans from the original 17 schools that met in 1945, thank you for being here. To our deans from the HBCU Business Deans Roundtable, thank you for being here. To our various panelists, you have been incredible, incredible. You can rest assured you'll be hearing from me, because we are going to work this network to make a difference for us in the HBCU space. So thank you to all of you. Let me take a moment again to thank all our staff who've worked, CAU-TV. We have a list of sponsors in the back of your book. Let me thank them all individually. Amazon, Dell Technologies, Fifth Third Bank, the HBCU Business Deans Roundtable, NEBO, and the Cooper Group. These are our sponsors. We appreciate you. We thank you for your support of our programs. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the program. We have been blessed by your presence. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.